Let me make sure I'm ready for this video real quick. Got my notes? Check. Pepsi? Check. Sunglasses? Check. Hat? Check. And yes, thick skin? Check. Let's go. Welcome to Golden Bluted, everybody. If you are a college football fan, please go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button because that's all we do here. Videos every single day. And when you get a chance, go check out our Patreon page. We have a lot of great perks over there. We call our Patreons the shot callers because they call the shots around here. Remember, $5 and up Patreons will get to decide the game that we're going to live stream in the regular season, and you'll get to watch with me, Golden Bluted. And our score prediction contest will be coming back. Every week I'll pick out a game, and my Patreons will pick the score, and whoever comes close to the score wins $20. And you can win as many times as you want. The winners get paid at the end of every month. So for every $1 your membership is worth at the Patreon page, that's how many guesses you'll get on my score prediction contest. So right now is the best time to join Patreon page here at Golden Bluted. I almost feel bad for Pitt fans because they picked the wrong year to play West Virginia. This was kind of sort of bad luck for Pitt. Just to be honest with you, if Pitt and West Virginia would have played last year, Pitt would have probably beat West Virginia by a couple of touchdowns, but that didn't happen. They're playing this year, and that's not good for Pitt. So the Backyard Brawl is coming back for the first time in over a decade. The last time these two teams played in football was in 2011. Now, Pitt does lead the all-time series, 61-40 and 3 ties. But since I've been born, and that's really all I care about, West Virginia leads this series 18-9 with 2 ties. So I was born at a good time to be a West Virginia fan, specifically when it relates to the Backyard Brawl. Now right now, West Virginia is on a current 3-game win streak. We beat them in 09, 010, and 011. However, the worst loss during my lifetime and probably the entire history of West Virginia football was in 2007 when Pitt knocked West Virginia out of the national championship, beating them 13-9. And they hold on to that 13-9 with a death grip because that's really the only thing they have. After you're done with this video, go check out my guys over on the West Virginia podcast. They were gracious enough to allow me on their show, and they have great content over there. They cover all things West Virginia, not just football, the entire state of West Virginia. I mean, the name of the show is called West Virginia Talk. It doesn't get much better than that. Last year, Pitt did go 11-3, and they were ACC champs, so they do have that. West Virginia went 6-7. They had a not so good season at all. We had higher expectations for last year. Now, Pitt averaged 41.4 points per game. That was 3rd in the nation. They had one of the best offenses in the entire country. And they allowed 23.6 points per game, which was 42nd. So they had a pretty good defense. Now, for West Virginia, we only averaged 25.2 points per game. That was 88. Our offense was anemic and terrible, but we had a decent defense. We allowed 23.8 points per game, which was 45th. So the defense for Pitt and the defense for West Virginia were very similar. They were both pretty good. They weren't elite, but they were pretty good. Both these teams had some big losses and some nice gains. But I will say I think Pitt had the biggest losses. First big loss, their starting quarterback, Kenny Pickett. He's off to the NFL. Last year, he was 334 for 497. That's 67.2%. Threw for 4,319 yards, 42 touchdowns, just 7 interceptions. That's a pretty good quarterback. Also a slight dual threat quarterback. He had 97 carries for 241 yards. That's 2.5 yards a carry and 5 touchdowns. Now his all-time career at Pitt, 1,045 for 1,674. That's 62.4%. Threw for 12,303 yards, 81 touchdowns, and 32 interceptions. All-time rushing status at Pitt, 416 carries for 809 yards, 1.9 yards a carry, and 20 touchdowns. So he was definitely known for his arm. That's a big loss for Pitt. But an even bigger loss for Pitt is losing the best wide receiver in the nation, Jordan Addison. Last year, 100 receptions, 1,593 receiving yards, and 17 touchdowns. He was the Biletnikoff Award winner, meaning literally the best wide receiver in the nation. All-time career at Pitt, which was just 2 years, 160 receptions for 2,259 yards and 21 touchdowns. So he was at Pitt for just 2 years. Kenny Pickett, he was at Pitt for 5 years. Now, what did they gain in the offseason? Well, they gained a decent quarterback in Keaton Slovis from USC. In 2021, he was 193 for 297. That's 65%. Threw for 2,153 yards, 11 touchdowns, but 8 interceptions. He was a turnover machine last year. Now, in his 3 years at USC, 652 for 953. That's 68.4%. Threw for 7,576 286 yards, 58 touchdowns, and 24 interceptions. So that's a decent gain for Pitt, but it definitely does not make up for what they lost. Now for West Virginia, what did they lose? They lost running back Letty Brown. In 2021, he had 223 carries for 1,065 yards, averaged 4.8 yards a carry, and 13 touchdowns. All time at West Virginia, which was a total of 4 years, 620 carries for 2,888 yards, 4.7 yards a carry, and 27 touchdowns. So Letty Brown was a pretty good running back for West Virginia. However, when he tested for the NFL Combine, he was actually the slowest running back that tested for the NFL. So think about that. Slowest running back, and yet he had those numbers. West Virginia knew how to use Letty Brown. Now, they also lost their leading receiver, Winston Wright. In 2021, he had 63 receptions for 688 yards and 5 touchdowns. For a leading wide receiver, that's not much. There was several other receivers that were over the 600-yard mark. So that's just a technicality as far as him being the leading wide receiver. That was a bad offense. All time at West Virginia, which was 3 years, 129 carries for 1,338 yards and 7 touchdowns. But the biggest loss was on the defense, and it was unexpected. We lost defensive lineman Hakeem Mesidor to the transfer portal to Miami. In 2021, he had 38 tackles, 8 for a loss, and 4.5 sacks. Now overall at West Virginia, which was for 2 years, he had 70 tackles, 14.5 for a loss, and 9.5 sacks. That's going to hurt a little bit, but West Virginia has excellent depth on the defensive line, and we went out and got Lockhart for Georgia Tech to help with that situation. I think Jordan Jefferson is going to do just fine though. What did West Virginia gain? West Virginia gained a lot. We gained running back Lynn J. Dixon from Clemson. Now in 2021, he wasn't used much. Just 10 carries for 48 yards, 4.8 yards a carry. There was a little bit of locker room friction, but all time at Clemson, his numbers look pretty good. 218 carries for 1,420 yards. That's 6.5 yards a carry, and that was over a 4-year span. His best years were in 2018 when he averaged 8.8 yards a carry, and 2019 when he averaged 6.1 yards a carry. If you can use this guy, he can be a weapon. This was a big time pickup for West Virginia. Not enough people are talking about that. But the biggest pickup, of course, JT Daniels, the transfer from Georgia. Now in 2021, he did get injured, but he was 68 for 94. That's 72.3%. Threw for 772 yards, 7 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions. That's the biggest issue with JT Daniels. If we can keep him healthy, he is going to be an absolute weapon for West Virginia. All time between USC and Georgia, which was 4 years, he's 389 for 610. That's 63.8%. Threw for 4,840 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 16 interceptions. So the dude has a cannon for an arm. As long as we can keep him healthy, and you can look at the track record for West Virginia keeping their quarterbacks healthy, we'll do pretty good, and I think we will keep him healthy. The last quarterback injury that I think of was Will Grier with his pinky. But honestly, I think the biggest pickup for West Virginia wasn't a player. I think it was getting offensive coordinator Graham Harrell. That immediately attracted JT Daniels. If we didn't get Graham Harrell, we're not getting JT Daniels. But the thing that really caught my eye was teams under Graham Harrell in year 1 have averaged 8 to 10 points more per game. So West Virginia could potentially average 33 to 35 points per game this year. Now, West Virginia would have went 12-1. 12-1 with an offense like that last year. The only loss we would have had would have been against Baylor. Think about that. Our defense kept us in games that we had no business being in. That defense is still going to be legit this year. Neil Brown has proven, even with big losses, he can put a very good defense out on the field. It's just we couldn't figure out an offense. Well, that's getting figured out right now as we speak. Things happened the complete opposite for West Virginia and Pitt. Pitt lost their best offensive players and their offensive coordinator, Mark Whipple, to Nebraska. West Virginia went out and got great offensive players and an offensive coordinator. And that's why I say this was straight up bad luck for Pitt. If Pitt and West Virginia would have played last year, Pitt would have won easily. But this year, I think West Virginia will win. Easily. Yes, I'm saying it. I think West Virginia can win by double digits. So let's look at the schedule for both of these teams and see how I see it playing out. So for West Virginia, we start off on the road to Pitt, and I think we win. I think we beat Pitt by double digits. Then we come back home to Kansas. That's an easy win. FCS Tulsa, that's an easy win. On the road to Virginia Tech, that's going to be a hostile road environment, but Virginia Tech's going to be very, very bad this year. That's a win for West Virginia. Then we go on the road to Texas. Now, this is back-to-back road trips, so I think West Virginia can trip up here. So I actually have West Virginia losing to Texas on the road. And Texas recruits at a high level. They have the talent, but I don't think they have the right coaching. However, they'll have enough to trip up West Virginia. But then West Virginia gets a bye week, a much needed bye week after a loss. Come back home to Baylor. Since it's in Morgantown, I think West Virginia wins. Baylor has never beaten West Virginia in Morgantown, and West Virginia going to be a much better team this year. That's a win for West Virginia. Then on the road to Texas Tech, West Virginia gets their revenge and absolutely obliterates Texas Tech this year. Come back home to a bad TCU. That's an easy win. Go on the road to Iowa State. At first, I had this as a loss, but I looked more into Iowa State. They're going to be a bad team. I think West Virginia goes on the road to Ames, Iowa, and beats Iowa State. Come back home, finally in the streak against Oklahoma. I think West Virginia beats Oklahoma this year, maybe convincingly. And I'm not trash talking Oklahoma. You're going to have a good team, but West Virginia is going to have a great offense, and it's in Morgantown. After that, we get an up-and-coming Kansas State, who I think could be a sleeper in the Big 12, but it's in Morgantown, so I have West Virginia with the win. And finally, a road trip to Oklahoma State. I think West Virginia loses, even though I have Oklahoma State taking a step back. This is a road trip into the year. Oklahoma State will be playing for something, so I have this as a loss for West Virginia. So I think West Virginia could go 10-2 this year. Now, what about Pitt? I do think Pitt takes a step back this year, but how big of a step back? Well, their schedule actually sets up quite nicely. You get West Virginia at home. That's going to be a letdown loss because Pitt fans think they're going to win that game, but you're not. West Virginia is going to win that game by double digits. Then you get Tennessee at home. That's another loss for Pitt. Tennessee is going to have a magical offense this year. They will go into Heinz Field and beat Pitt. So that's an 0-2 start. Then they go on the road to Western Michigan, who beat them last year, but I think Pitt goes in focused into this game, still licking their wounds from those two losses, and beats Western Michigan. Then you get FCS Rhode Island at home. That's a win. Georgia Tech at home. That's a win. Virginia Tech at home. That's another win. Then you get your bye week. So you go from 0-2 to 4-2 going into your bye week. Not bad. After that, on the road to Louisville. Tough road environment, but I think Pitt is the better team. That's a win. On the road to North Carolina. I think North Carolina beats Pitt this year. North Carolina is going to be much better, and this is on the road. Next game, they get Syracuse at home. That's very, very important. If this were a road trip, I would have Pitt losing, but since it's at home, I think Pitt has enough to beat Syracuse. Then they go on the road to Virginia, who's going to be up and coming. This is 50-50 toss-up. I almost went with Virginia, but they haven't proven anything yet, so I'm going with Pitt with the win. Come back home, beat a bad Duke team, and then finally on the road to the Canes of Miami, who I think they lose to. I think Miami could win the Coastal if the Coastal still exists this year and gets to the ACC Championship. If the Coastal doesn't exist, I still think Miami gets to the ACC Championship because I think they'll be the second best team in the ACC in 2022. So overall, I have Pitt going 8-4. That's not that big of a step back. That's a decent year. You'll get to a decent ball, but if you're expecting to repeat as ACC champs and to beat West Virginia and Tennessee, that's not going to happen. So it's just the perfect storm for West Virginia and Pitt. Pitt lost some key members of their offense from the top 5 offense last year, and West Virginia gained some key players to actually give West Virginia a halfway decent offense. West Virginia could be a top 20 offense in 2022. Potentially even higher depending on how well those 5 starting offensive linemen come together. So I'm predicting at least a top 20 offense for West Virginia, maybe even better. So that's just some tough luck for you, Pitt fans. I wish I could say I feel sorry for you, but I really don't. Had this game been played last year, you'd have nothing to worry about, but this year, you have some big things to worry about. Y'all let me know what you think in the comments section. Do you think I got it right, or do you think I'm way off? That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.